When we think about the German games these days, there's a very clear idea that comes to mind. Games that have little luck involved or no luck at all. They have an economic aspect. They are simple, elegant, etc., etc. But there's a category that was formed over time. And today I'm going to tell you about a game, Tally Ho, which is a German game in the sense it was designed by a German designer, made in Germany. Right there, but it doesn't respond to our idea of German games, possibly because it was made before the idea of German games came to embrace a whole category of games. This game has been around for a couple of decades, from the 1970s, I think. And clearly at the time, being a German game meant something designed by a German person. It really is different from what you expect from German tradition. It is a game which is heavily, insanely heavily luck-based. It's a total luck fest, and yes, strange enough, this enormous luck element is combined with a very strict positional aspect that has a certain classical element to it. Chess, backgammon, mancala, in the sense of games with the exact position and the relationship, special relationship between the pieces really matters. Chess in the sense of pieces that are trying to capture other pieces. I almost feel like if you take the chess pieces, you shuffle them around and you set them up on the board randomly and then you play a game, then you get a sense of what Tally Ho is about mechanically, philosophically, existentially, I would say. As for the theme, two-player game with two parties. One's a party of animals, foxes and bears. The other one is a part of humans, lumberjacks and hunters, and they're trying to destroy each other. At least the humans are trying to kill the animals, and the lumberjacks also trying to cut down some trees, and the animals are trying to get their revenge. Maybe there is an ecologic message. The humans are just consuming nature, and the animals are trying to take back what's rightfully theirs by eating the humans. There's also a third party of neutral animals so that everybody's trying to eat, and it includes the ducks. So I don't know what has this duck to look so cool and smart about, because almost every other character here on the box would enjoy a nice portion of pâté de foie gras that would involve this duck as the special host. Strange game thematically and as I said mechanically. Let's take a closer look. The board is square and it is divided in 49 smaller squares. The game includes 48 pieces and you place them face down on the board at the beginning of the game during setup, leaving the central space empty. Game is extremely simple. When it is your turn, you can do one of two things. You can turn one of the face down tiles face up, and once you turn them you cannot change the orientation. For most game pieces the orientation doesn't really matter, but it just so happens that for this guy it does matter. This guy can move in all directions, the hunter, but can only capture pieces in the direction in which the rifle is. So this is what you do during your turn. This is what you may elect to do to spend your turn, simply to flip one of the tiles face up. Another thing that you can do is to move one of the tiles that you're allowed to move into an empty space. Or if you can capture an enemy piece or a neutral piece with your move, then you can move into the space that includes the piece that you're capturing. So for example, there's an empty space. I could spend my turn to move there. I don't know if it would be all that profitable. Maybe it would in the long run, but that is something that I can do. Here's an example of something a little more interesting, because there I have a pheasant and the hunter is facing the right direction. So if it is my turn and I control the hunter, I could go there and capture that piece. There are movement restrictions and capturing restrictions, and you have a very good player rate detailing all that. For movement, we have a bear. There are two bears in the game and they only move one square at a time. Also the lumberjack only moves one square at a time. All other game pieces move by any number of spaces as long as it is in a straight line. Within a turn, you cannot move in multiple directions. Also, you have trees that do not move at all. As for capturing, most pieces can capture in all directions, with the exception again of the hunter that only captures in the shooting direction. It also has some pieces that are neutral pieces, they do not capture anybody. The pieces that have a capturing ability have specific targets. The bear can capture the humans, the lumberjack and the hunter. The fox can capture the pheasant and the duck. The lumberjack can only cut down trees, and the hunter can shoot any animal in the game. A player controls the bear and the foxes, another player controls the lumberjacks and the hunters. No one controls these tiles specifically, but the trees, once they are turned face up, there's nothing that they can do, the players can do with them. They don't move, they don't do anything, they're simply obstacles. And the ducks and the pheasants are neutral pieces, either player can move them. They don't actually belong to anybody. So what you're trying to do with them is to put them close to your own pieces so you can capture them, you can use them as targets, or you can also try to place them around in such ways to box in other pieces, to block movements, you use them as shields, this sort of thing. As for movement, actually there are two other important restrictions. One is that you cannot move a piece back to the position where it was the turn before, right after you did that. That is, if I move there this turn, next turn I cannot simply put the fox there. I have to move it somewhere else. You cannot, pretty much, next turn you cannot redo or undo the move that you did the previous turn. The other thing is that if a player turns a tile face up, you cannot immediately move it. You have to move something else, and then the other player will have a chance of moving that piece if it moves at all. So as you can see, the board will reveal itself. Also, thanks to the lumberjack and thanks to captures, new spaces will open up. The fox is running here. This fox is pretty lucky. It is surrounded by hunters, but no one is pointing at them. And as you can imagine, when you're flipping tiles up, there is a luck element. Suppose that instead of a tree here, the tile had been this one. Well, then that would have been much harder for the fox. Actually, the fox would have got a chance of running away, but then this guy would go and capture the duck. And then there are cases where simply you cannot run away. Suppose that this is the situation, and when we turn that tile face up, it turns out to be like this, with the hunter facing the fox. Then the fox is surrounded by other pieces. There isn't much that the fox can do. Maybe the fox can do that, but now it's time for the hunter to move, and the hunter captures the fox. You continue like this, flipping tiles face up, moving to capture, to improve your position, to defend your game pieces, to avoid capture, until all tiles on the board have been turned face up. When that occurs, the end of the game is triggered, then each player still has exactly 5 turns. And during those 5 turns, you can keep capturing enemy pieces if you decide to do so. Another thing that happens in those 5 turns, player has a chance of exiting the board if there are open spaces. For example, if there is a tree in the middle of a path, well, too bad. Players can exit the board with their pieces from these 4 paths here, and if you can exit one of your own pieces from the board, then you get to score it. You add it to your victory pile together with the enemy pieces that you captured during the game. When the game is over, you count victory points, and this is the value of each piece in terms of victory points. If you have one such piece in your victory pile, you score the corresponding number of points. And since the games can be very unfair, very uneven, it seems to me that in general, the animals, the bears and the foxes have a harder time than the hunters and the lumberjack. Also, the luck factor can be enormous. You can have a game where all of your game pieces are trapped between a corner. Most of your game pieces are trapped between a corner and trees, and as the opponent goes around and and captures pheasants and ducks. So the random setup can create very uneven and unfair situations. Because of that, one thing that the rulebook recommends, and I do recommend, is to always play 2 games back to back, switching sides. So if one player finds one side easier to play, then the other player will get that easy side next turn. So you play 2 sides, 2 games switching sides, 2 games back to back, and then you count the total victory points that players score within the 2 games to determine the winner of the session. Still, if the placement, the setup was even in one game and completely unbalanced in the following game, well, the luck element is still there, and that may affect the overall experience of the game. I think I like this game. I think I like it. I'm not 100% sure. I like it right now. I didn't like it very much at the beginning. It has grown on me. Maybe in 2 weeks I'll hate it and I'll throw it against the wall screaming. It's a really strange game, precisely as I mentioned in introduction, because it has this strange classical positional element of captures and moves in a very claustrophobic environment, and at the same time it has this huge luck element. Especially the first time or 2 that you play it, you will get the sense that it is all about the deployment, which you have absolutely no control on. You will get the sense, well, my opponent had a bear that woke up around a bunch of hunters that were all facing other directions, and the bear had a very hearty snack with the heads of these hunters that were simply pushed out of existence in no time, and the human player didn't have much of a chance. And then the next game, the bear would simply appear exactly facing the rifle of the hunter and will be destroyed before anything else can be done. And even if that happened, that would be ideal, because you would be pretty lucky. It would almost be suspicious that one game the luck would favor exactly one player, the human player, and the next game perfectly equally in a mirror way luck would favor the other player. Most likely luck would heavily favor one player rather than the other, maybe over a string of games. But, and here is a big but slash however who knew. In truth, there's more that you can do here than you expect. There's more than meets the eye. It doesn't all come down to complete randomness. Yes, certain scenarios, absolutely, certain configurations are simply impossible for one of the players. But once you become familiar with the mechanics, there is more than meets the eye here. There are more things that you can do than you would think at first. So I'd say there are more games that will end up being completely dominated by luck than you would expect. There are still things that you can do. There is time that is important. You learn how to use the neutral elements that at the beginning you think are simply as possible targets, and maybe I don't want my opponent to get them, which is already, let's say, second generation thinking. The first generation is like, I want to get that duck. Then like, well, man, I could deny it to my opponent. Then I'm like, the duck could get in the way between one of my animals and the ugly hunter. And actually, if the hunter takes the time to do that, then I have to maneuver out, and maybe with the help of another innocent duck getting in the way, I can get close enough to the hunter, then the hunter stops firing and starts running. There are ways that you can do with the manipulation of the space which are not obvious but they're fairly interesting. The lumberjack may change the landscape quite literally, because there are these trees that are impassable for everybody, but the lumberjacks can get them out of the way. The game starts as extremely claustrophobic, and that is the time when things are really entirely luck-based, because if you flip 2 pieces face up and one is poised to capture the other, there is nothing else that you can do. Later, when there is more space around, because some pieces have been captured and some trees have been removed, then you start having more maneuverability. Maybe the game would be improve slightly if you start not with a single empty spot on the board, but with a couple more. So from the very beginning you have a little more reaction time. But then again, another element that emerges is that the order in which you flip the tiles and what you flip matters. There are certain ways of flipping tiles that will be more dangerous, some other ones a little safer. I don't want to, well, I like to see a duck there, but of course if that piece belongs to the opponent, that is going to hurt me. So I'm going to go for that other tile, see what is in there. Most likely will be less profitable because of the position where the tile is, but also if it ends up being a tile of the opponent, it's not going to be as devastating for me. So there are layers of decisions and strategy that emerge after repeat plays that pleasantly surprised me. I did not expect the game to have enough strategy to it to almost, not entirely, but to almost act as a counterweight to the luck element. The luck element is still there. The rulebook recommends that you play at least 2 games in a row. I would say go 5. Go for 5, have your little mini tournament and see who can win 3 of them. Because even two Lady Luck may not be so nice to get the advantage to one side in one game and to the other side in the next. 2 games back to back is what we traditionally do in war games when we do at 2 sides and one is objectively at a disadvantage. Then you flip sides and you have the perfect mirroring. Here you may have that the setup makes it incredibly hard for one side both times. So with 5 games you have more of a chance. Of course it becomes more of a commitment. It's a game that you can play with kids, you can play with non-casual gamers, with casual gamers and non-casual gamers. And I don't know that casual gamers would enjoy it all that much. They would in a sense because the rules are so simple. On the other hand, precisely because things are not intuitive, the casual gamers may have a harder time than the committed gamers to see the strategies that are not obvious and that do not meet the eye at first sight. The production is very good, the presentation is very nice, the art is pleasant, the tiles are sturdy. It's a design with a very strong personality. It's different from many other games that I played. Again, it feels like chess with a random deployment and a funny art and funny theme. Not for everybody. I personally enjoyed it. I think I will enjoy it in the future from time to time. May not be my first to-go game. I think the stars need to be right for this strange hybrid between very strict and fairly deep strategy and complete randomness that Tally-Ho is. But it's a game that has been around for a while, for quite a while actually. I'm enjoying playing it. Again, I don't know for how long I will enjoy it because my perception of the game has changed so much from the first time that I played it. And, up to now, maybe it will change in the future, but I can tell you, Tally-Ho is a fascinating game. It's a strange game with a very unique personality, strange mix between tight, abstract, spatial logic, and complete randomness. Give it a try, so maybe it works for you. I don't know whether to recommend it or not because it's so unique and I can't think of a perfect target audience. I think it's more than like a perfect player that always plays this kind of games. Because I don't know that there is a kind behind this game. There is this guy and that's it. More like players that play, who knows what you play usually, but that you want the gears of your brain to work in an unusual way with a challenge that does not resemble other challenges that you've seen in other games.